The first thing that most people do when they get a new iPhone is go buy a new case, and Apple's cases are actually worth considering, especially the leather and silicone cases. I personally have been using the Apple Silicone cases primarily for the last few years on all of my iPhones, and I have a pretty good idea how well they function and hold up over time. So for this year, I also decided to pick up one of the Apple leather cases just to see how it compares to the silicone. And after having this leather case on my iPhone 14 Pro for the last few weeks, I have some thoughts between the two. So if we just start off with the design between these two cases, they look strikingly similar. Especially when you're looking at it on this camera, it's probably hard to tell which one is the leather case and which one is the silicone case. Both of these cases are really just a plastic skeleton on the inside with a wrapping of either leather or silicone on the outside. And when you stack them together, you can see that they are essentially the exact same size on all sides. So you don't have to worry about one over the other, one of them being thicker or more cumbersome than the other. Even the camera bumps on the back are the same. They're both raised with a little bit of silicone or leather and then topped off with a plastic ring. If we work our way around, we can see some minor differences, starting off with the buttons, which we'll talk about in just a moment. On the top, they're both completely blank. On the sides, you have the cutouts for the mute switch and the volume buttons, and you can see that the mute switch opening on the silicone case is just slightly larger than the mute switch opening on the leather case. And on the bottom, you have individual holes cut out or drilled out in the silicone case for the speaker's microphone versus larger cutouts on the leather case. I decided to skip out on the Apple clear cases this year, but there was one difference between the clear cases and these that I wanted to point out. And that is on the bottom of these cases, they are completely wrapped at the bottom. So if you are swiping up, you might feel this on your thumb or your finger as you're swiping up on the phone to go to home or to switch between apps, whereas the clear cases do not have that. And it's not really an issue for me. I just wanted to point out the difference between these and the clear cases in that respect. Now, when it comes to the size of the iPhone, like I mentioned a moment ago, both of these cases are pretty slim for what they are and minimally add to the bulk of the iPhone itself. These cases really are just a minimal shell addition to the iPhone, so there's not a lot of bulk that it adds to it, which is nice because when you have a case, you want it to be protected, but you also want it to be as minimal as possible just to keep down on the bulk in your pocket and in your hand. And speaking of how it feels in your hand, these two cases obviously are made out of different materials and therefore have a different feel to them. The silicone case definitely has a bit more of a tacky feel to it, not sticky, but tacky, definitely like you have a little bit more grip on it, or you can get a little bit more grip on it compared to the leather case. I find that if my hands are super dry, the leather case is definitely a little bit more slippery in my hands and could be a little bit easier to drop than the silicone case. The silicone case just definitely feels more secure in my hand when I'm holding it in more situations than the leather case does. And you can even see this like on the table. If I apply just a little bit of pressure, the leather case moves more freely on the table than the silicone case does, just because there's a bit more grip on the silicone than there is on the leather. But that extra grip does not go unpunished because the silicone case is more difficult to get in and out of your pockets sometimes depending on what you're doing. For example, getting in my car or truck, if I forgot to take my iPhone out before I got in and I have to reach into my pocket while sitting down in the car, the silicone case is much more difficult to get out of my pocket than the leather case is. And the silicone case most likely is going to be pulling the pocket liner out with it. Now, I know that sounds like such a little thing, but I don't know how many times people have complained to me about silicone cases doing that with their pockets, and I've heard it on podcasts and I've seen it on other videos. So it's a thing that people are concerned about. And yes, the silicone case will do that, and the leather case does that much less. The next thing I want to compare on these two cases is the buttons. On the leather case, you get these beautiful machined aluminum buttons, and on the silicone cases, you get, well, silicone buttons. And besides how much better these machined aluminum buttons look on the leather case versus the silicone buttons on the silicone case, they actually feel way better as well. They actually click and give you a good tactile feedback when on the phone versus the silicone, which is just kind of spongy. I definitely prefer the more tactile, deliberate clicks that you get when using these buttons versus the silicone buttons. Now, I want to talk real quick about how these two cases will wear over time. And like I said, I've been using the Apple Silicone cases primarily for the last few years. And what I found is that these Apple Silicone cases generally don't wear the best. I actually made a whole video complaining about the Apple Silicone cases a while back and how eventually they just start to get these shiny spots where you rub your hands on them or where they go in and out of your pocket and then eventually start to peel in those locations. There's just really no way around that. If you're going to be using your case and if it actually falls and hits something every now and then, you're going to get wear spots on the silicone cases and eventually some peeling because it is just a piece of plastic wrapped with some silicone. There's just no getting around the wear that you're going to get on the Apple Silicone cases. And you can see right here that on this iPhone 13 Pro case, which is a little over a year old, there's some tearing down here on the case, some peeling in the corner, and I'm starting to get these shiny spots around this case. And I actually did have another case that I was using for a good portion of the time with the iPhone 13 Pro. So this one wasn't used for a full year, but you can already see that wear happening. Overall, the case has held up pretty well over the last year, and how much can you really expect with a piece of silicone wrapped around a piece of plastic that is handled hundreds of times per day? The leather cases, on the other hand, will develop a patina over time, which is just basically oils from your hands or from surfaces you place it on will eventually absorb into the leather and start creating kind of its own character in the leather. People usually like that. That's usually a preferred reason to get the leather cases. Here's a leather case I was using for a while with my iPhone 13 Pro. It's not the Apple leather case, so it's not exactly apples to apples, but you can see that it starts to develop its own characteristics and different details on the case itself. And you do get some maybe not so desirable quirks in the leather as well. So you can see how it's kind of dark and black down here, but the leather will wear differently for each person and each device. This case hasn't had a lot of time to start developing a patina yet, but one thing I have noticed with the leather case is that I'm actually already getting a MagSafe ring on the case itself. So if you look closely on the back of the case, you can definitely see the outlines of a ring forming already after just a couple of weeks on this leather case from the different MagSafe docks that I use. And I've seen this before with the silicone cases as well, but it usually just wipes right off using a microfiber cloth. But with a leather case, it doesn't go anywhere. It just stays there. So this is going to get darker and more refined over time. So you're definitely going to see this MagSafe ring if you're using MagSafe. The MagSafe case also has these wrinkles around the edges of the case where it's kind of folded in, and those will get darker over time as the case ages. And then if you drop this, you can actually tear this leather material and it will start peeling just like the silicone case does. And that's weird. I already have this little puncture at the top of this case and I have no idea where that could have come from. And I think that's all the physical differences between these two cases. The Apple leather case comes in at $59, whereas the silicone case comes in at $49. And like most things in life, I wish I could just kind of Frankenstein these two things together because I love the grippiness in my hand of the silicone case, but I love the ability to get this in and out of my pocket easier with a leather case, and the buttons are just way, way better. So what do you guys think? Do you prefer the Apple leather case with the better buttons, or do you like the more tactile grip on the Apple silicone case? Let me know below. Also, if you're curious about the best matte screen protector you can get for your iPhone 14 Pro, definitely check out this video right over there. Hit the thumbs up button if you liked it, hit subscribe if you want, and I'll see you next time.